Yeah, real original, I know. So Smile 2 is a film that I've been looking forward to ever since the trailer dropped a few months back, and even before that, when it got announced after the first films were released, I was very much excited and looking forward to this one because I thought Smile from 2022 was easily one of the biggest surprises of the year. I remember seeing the first trailer for it and thinking, this looks like hot garbage. And then I wound up seeing it on opening night with my mom, and we both had a great time. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a very creative new horror film. I've never personally seen It Follows, but I've heard people say that it's a lot like that film, so I can't really compare it, but from what I understand, that film does very similar things. And if that's the case, then cool, I need to check out It Follows because I really like Smile. Now, as for the sequel, we're picking up with completely different characters. We have a brand new protagonist played by none other than Naomi Scott. She is an actress that I think is very underrated and definitely a very slept on performer, and I think needs to be utilized more frequently moving forward. I know not everyone loved the live action Aladdin film. I'm not the biggest fan of it per se, but I thought that she as Jasmine was excellent, and she is a great singer. I thought she was awesome in the Power Rangers movie from 2017, which I cannot believe did not get a sequel. I am still bummed about that because I really like that movie a lot. And she's been in other stuff here and there, but this film was a great display of just how capable she is as an actress. She is fully encapsulating her acting range in this film, and I think it does a great service to her as an actress. Supporting cast, I think, does a decent job as well. Much like the first film, we got plenty of people who are competent in the roles that they're given, but really not many of them shine as brightly as, say, some of the supporting cast from the first film. For example, in the first film, you got a lot of characters that really stand out, like Sosie Bacon's fiance, her ex-boyfriend Joel, her sister. There's just a lot there that she's able to play off of and interact with, and they all have separate parts. With this, it's a little bit different just because instead of having Sosie Bacon play Rose, who's a down-to-earth woman and has a family and is just like all of us. In this film, Naomi Scott plays Sky Riley, a super famous pop star who's basically on the same levels as like Lady Gaga, Taylor Swift, Olivia Rodrigo, those types. And then her surrounding cast is like her mom, who's basically her manager, her one friend Joshua, who's basically like her yes man, basically, and a bunch of other people who are just involved in her career and don't really have much of a strong personality that makes them separate from all the other noise. She's also got different experiences where she's got a bunch of fans that are surrounding her, and honestly, there's one scene in particular where she's meeting up with a bunch of fans at an event, signing autographs, taking pictures, and it just puts things in perspective and reminds me that whenever I go to conventions for like Comic-Con and I'm meeting with people, this is how I don't want to act, where I am fawning over this person, making them feel unbelievably uncomfortable, and then just going way too far with my reaction and not acting like a proper human being. Two of the biggest characters that stand out in the supporting cast, though, would be her friend Gemma and also this guy Lewis, who is seen all over the trailers and basically the reason for why the Smile entity or whatever we're calling this doesn't even have a name. I'm not updated on the lore, sorry. His suicide is the reason that it's following her now, because she goes over to his place, he's being attacked by it or whatever, smashes his face in with a weight, and now the movie takes off from there. I will say, so this movie is longer than the first, and while I wouldn't say I was necessarily bored at any points, I do think that some sections may drag on a little bit longer, and it may not be as evenly paced as the first film, and I know that's kind of a pretentious, oh, the pacing wasn't good enough, it didn't cater to my needs, I need perfect pacing at all times, otherwise I cannot enjoy a film, no. I'm not trying to make that kind of statement, but there is something to be said about like, okay, maybe you could have wrapped this up, you could have tightened this up a little bit more, maybe we're lingering a little too long, but this pushing over that 2-hour runtime definitely makes it feel like maybe there could have been something that could have dialed this back to an hour 40, 90-minute runtime, who knows. But I will say there wasn't any outright moments where I was thinking, okay, that was an unnecessary addition, this went nowhere, we don't need to have this at all. They just had a lot packed into this film, and maybe there was just a way to clean it up a little bit nicer, who knows. They got plenty of jump scares in here, and while I would rather have a film that builds tension and unease as opposed to just cheap jump scares like the average Blumhouse movie does, I do think that these are like not as annoying as, say, your typical jump scare in a horror movie. These are at least played up a little bit so it's like, you know, you're actually on the edge of your seat and you're not just like startled out of nowhere. It's actually doing something to kind of reel you in just before it freaks you out. Cinematography in this film, much like the first one, is excellent. I think they do an incredible job of working this camera, doing all these upside down landscape shots. The opening sequence, if I'm not mistaken, was a continuous one-take tracking shot. I mean, it could have been cut up like 1917, but it was made to look like one at the very least. I really liked how the opening of this film kind of bridges the gap between the ending of Smile 1 and the beginning of this story. I thought that fit together really nicely. And unlike a lot of other horror sequels, it just felt like there was a nice fluid transition between Smile from 2022 starring Sosie Bacon into Smile 2 2024 starring Naomi Scott. When you have a horror movie that's starring a completely different set of characters, a lot of times they won't even acknowledge the previous one. There'll be hardly any reference at all, and that's basically all you get aside from a couple of nods to the old cast and maybe a cameo or two. But this actually felt like it was all in the same fluid motion, and I appreciated that. And look, I know I said it before, but I just cannot understate how great Naomi Scott is in this. She's playing a character who not only has struggled with addiction and is a recovering addict, but is also being mentally abused by this entity thing to see a bunch of stuff that nobody else can verify, and so she's just going nuts. And it's just really cool seeing how Sosie Bacon did so great in the first film, and now again we get Naomi Scott in this one basically experiencing very similar things, and they're both so effective as actresses that it all just makes you buy into what's happening and sympathize with their characters. And it's hard to say, in the hands of a less competent actress than Naomi Scott in this role, who knows how this film would have actually turned out and what the quality of it would have been, since a lot of it is carried by her performance. Also, just a quick aside, but Ray Nicholson, son of Jack Nicholson, has a small role in this film, and that was just, I don't know, nice cherry on top, I guess I'll say. In terms of criticisms, I think the first film just was a better film overall, in my opinion. I still really like this one, but I still think the original was just unique. It stood on its own and never needed a sequel, but it's not hurt by this one in any way. I just think that a lot of elements from the first film are certainly borrowed and utilized again in the second one. So comparatively, it does seem a little bit similar. One could argue a bit of a retread of the first movie, just with different characters. But I do think that it found its own voice. It added in a couple more elements that we didn't have in the first film, and that makes it just stand on its own overall. I don't know though, I just feel like Smile 1 had an easier time building that tension and unease, and maybe it's just because I was so unfamiliar with this concept when I saw the first film, and now that I'm watching a sequel and I've already seen this first film twice, that I'm just so familiar with this, antagonistic force, this entity thing that's smiling at people before it makes them kill themselves. Maybe it's just like, now that I'm familiar with how this thing operates, it's not as freaky to me when I'm watching a sequel. But with the first film, you didn't know what was real and what wasn't. You were just so trusting at that point, and you're like, okay, this is a safe spot because she's talking to this character and they're cool. But oh my gosh, wait, what? That's not really them? And then by the second film, you're able to recognize that a little bit easier. So maybe that just because of the fact that this movie is a sequel, that kind of works to the film's detriment. And that is a shame, but I still think that's a valid point to bring up, at least in terms of how it explores this concept. But again, if you like Smile 1, you're gonna like Smile 2. I can't really see anyone who liked the original film walking out of this one and being completely insulted that it totally ruined the lore of the first Smile film. I wish I never went in there. This isn't a Joker 2 situation where you're gonna love the first one and then completely be confused as to what you just witnessed with the sequel. So yeah, it was a solid movie, would recommend, wouldn't mind revisiting it, and that's why I'm gonna give this one an 8. Smile 2, did you see it and like it? Did you see it and hate it? Do you think that these Smile movies are cool and worth continuing, or do you think that they should have never been made and they're the worst horror movies you've ever seen? I would love to hear what you have to say down in the comments below. Just be respectful about it. Of course, don't go at each other's throats over it. Just a movie after all, not the most important thing in the world. If you like this review, like this video, subscribe if you want more videos like this in your feed. And if you want, you can check out the links in my description. It'll take you to my other platforms. I am on Letterboxd, Serialized, GG, and Instagram. Letterboxd is where I post my movie reviews, Serialized is where I post my TV show reviews, and GG is where I post my video game reviews. And not all those reviews make it onto this channel. So if you don't want to be waiting around for me to edit a video every single time you want to hear my thoughts on a certain movie, TV show, or video game, then I highly recommend you check out out the links in the description. Give me a follow on all those platforms. But until next time, guys, God be with you. Take care.